Good evening, sisters and friends, and welcome to this month's Let's Talk About It webinar. For those who don't know, my name is Olive, and I'm one of the co-chairs for Methodist Women in Britain. So it's fitting that today from Methodist Women in Britain, we're grateful that you've joined us for this vital topic. Since we launched the series in September, we've journeyed through significant topics, and for those who've been able to go onto our website, you've been able to see the topics on menopause, on FGM, on mental health, and there'll be many more that will come up after this particular one. But today we are talking about domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. Now, this is a very heavy subject, often cloaked in silence, but by being here, you're helping to create a culture of safety and a culture of light. Before we go ahead, I just would like to put this forward. I want to repeat a care phrase that I'm going to repeat over and over again because I think your wellness is priority to us. So I want to acknowledge that the topic that we're dealing with tonight is deeply personal. Please prioritize your well-being. If you, at any point during this webinar, you feel overwhelmed or triggered, please feel free to mute, feel free to walk away, feel free to come out of the webinar. Also, on one of the screens, you'll find that we've put some help numbers. This is the National Domestic Abuse Helpline and also the Mix Helpline, so that if anybody at any point would like assistance, you could please refer to those numbers or get in touch with any one of us within Methodist Women in Britain, and we will direct you. So to guide us through this complex topic, as you are aware, Methodist Women in Britain creates a platform and a forum where we empower, educate, and provide women with opportunities. We are not subject matter specialists. So we've invited our friends from Forward UK, and Forward UK is the leading women-led organization with over 35 years of experience. They specialize in gender-based violence issues that affect African women and girls, specifically focusing on the intersection of culture, dignity, and rights. We've also invited, and we're glad to be joined by Faith and Vogue Coalition, and they're a unique partnership of specialists who recognize that for women, their faith is their bedrock. However, they also understand how religious settings can sometimes be used to justify abuse or select victims. And I think we can all attest to the fact that the numbers within faith settings of abuse are quite significant. Though we don't always hear about them, they're quite significant. So they're going to come in and give us their point of view. We are going to then hear later on through Kate Little from our safeguarding team, 3 survivors who have bravely agreed to come into the setting to talk about their lived experience. But firstly, I will hand you over to our partners, either Forward UK or Faith and Vogue Coalition. You're both welcome.
Thank you so much. I'll take the floor. I've just prepared a couple of slides just for visuals. I hope you can see it. Great. Okay, thank you so much. I'll do my best to stick to the time. My name is Fatima Awil. I work at Forward as Senior Partnership and Advocacy Officer, and it's really a pleasure to be invited to this really important webinar. During my intervention, I'll focus a bit on kind of explaining introducing Forward and explaining what we understand of domestic violence and violence against women and girls, as well as why it's important that we talk about this and address this from a societal perspective. Towards the end of my intervention, I'll give a couple of recommendations and then spotlight some of the work that we're doing at Forward to continue to raise light on this issue and progress towards change. So Olive already briefly explained Forward, but indeed, Forward is an African-led women's rights organization, and we work at a cross-cutting level to end violence against women and girls. So we focus particularly on the African, Asian, and other racially minoritized communities. And we do this through a number of means, through policy and advocacy, through working on projects, but the heart of our work is really in working with directly with the communities that we represent. So really creating change within communities is the core aspect of our work. So we have been existing for over 30 years, but to update, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary last year, so we reached a milestone. And our work really matters because we support those who are marginalized and unheard or facing multiple layers of discrimination. And, you know, this can intersect from cultural stigma to lack of access to services, immigration barriers, and so much more. And of course, our work therefore intersects with focusing on domestic violence and spiritual abuse. So our understanding is whether the issue is FGM, if it's child marriage, domestic violence, or related harms, our focus is really always on the safety and dignity and justice. And this is all underpinned by intersectionality, which is really important for us to also consider today and afterwards as well. So when we talk about domestic violence, I've just included a couple of bullet points on the screen, but domestic violence is a pattern of incidents, not just physical violence, used by a partner, ex-partner, or family member to establish power and control over another person. And it really often involves coercive, threatening, or degrading behavior, including psychological, emotional, it could be financial, and sexual abuse, amongst others. So common tactics can include isolating victims from support from their communities, restricting financial independence. It could include insults and monitoring behavior. It affects individuals of all genders and backgrounds, and it frequently escalates over time. So some examples here are included on the screen. And ultimately, domestic violence is about power and control and removing a person's sense of autonomy. And domestic violence is under the umbrella of violence against women and girls, which is any acts of gender-based violence, which causes physical, sexual, psychological harm. So this could be things like threats and coercion. It's really rooted in structural inequality and violates fundamental human rights. And just to highlight that coercive and controlling behavior is something that was recognized under the Serious Crime Act in 2015. So it's embedded in legislation. But we ultimately believe as an organization that, you know, alongside legislation and policy, there needs to be more work done to implement it on the ground and to ensure women and girls are supported and also provided the services that they need through a holistic approach that is accessible to them and is available within communities rather than having to ultimately seek it out with difficulty. So that's just a bit of an explanation of what domestic violence is. And when it comes to Forward's recommendations for faith groups, we acknowledge that domestic violence exists in every community, including faith communities. And we believe that there needs to be increased research and action in the area. So this means taking forward recommendations at all levels. So this includes policy, legislation, and also within communities. And this also means believing survivors and taking their suggestions forward, as well as their recommendations. Also, it's important to train faith leaders. Training is really important to increase awareness and also ensuring that there is that succinct referral mechanisms when an individual comes forward to disclose and seek out support. So training here is really important in safeguarding, but also trauma-informed, responsive, and also understanding coercive control. Also, we believe that it's necessary to prevent and also promote support when it comes to survivors. So ensuring the promotion of survivor-centered messaging. So this can be, for example, in sermons, women's group, and pastoral care. Alongside this, we also highlight that there is a need for the building of concrete and clear pathways for specialized violence against women and girls services. At a societal level, and also within our different faith groups and communities, there needs to be more work done to really challenge harmful cultural or patriarchal interpretations that enable abuse. And this is really important so that we can, again, raise awareness and also talk about what actually needs to be done. Are there, specific awareness campaigns that should be carried out to address particular problems within communities, and what more can be done to create safe spaces. And ultimately, what we need to do is have more safe spaces where women feel comfortable to disclose abuse without judgment. And we believe breaking the silence is crucial because faith communities have an enormous potential to influence change, challenge harmful norms, and support survivors through compassion and accountability. I know I'm reaching the end of our time, so I have some of these recommendations that I'd be happy to share so that could be sent to the wider group. I want to mention that within Forward, we're doing a couple of things in regards to this. So we are part of a network that works on addressing violence against women and girls called SARA Network. And also we're currently collaborating continuously with the Faith and Violence Against Women Coalition, as well as other fantastic leaders in this space to really bring about change. So I'll stop here for now, just for time, but I'm happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatima. Thank you very much. There'll be an opportunity. If you've got any questions, please note them down. There'll be an opportunity to ask whatever it is that we would like to ask from both our partners. So please keep those questions. We'll give you a chance to do that. We welcome Faith and Vogue Coalition.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Huda. My name is Huda Jawad. I am the Executive Director and founder of the Faith and Violence Against Women and Girls Coalition. I'm so pleased to be here with you today, or rather this evening. It's a special time for us Muslims for Ramadan, and it's a special time for our Christian community for Lent. We both are kind of spending time reflecting, trying to appreciate our connections as human beings and trying to be better people and live aligned with the divine mission of our Creator. So it's really poignant that we are coming together to talk about the issue of violence against women and girls, particularly since, we are creations of the Almighty and no one has the right to harm what God has created. Certainly in the Muslim tradition, that's a very strong tenet, and as is with all the Abrahamic faiths and all faiths, in fact. So what I really appreciated is the conversation and the presentation that Fatima had about a form of violence against women and girls called domestic abuse or domestic violence. And it's the most common form because it's really based around relationships and it's in the home. And often that the word domestic abuse or domestic violence kind of sounds really rather scary, and it's very it sounds like it belongs to a really horrible situation where there's real kind of caricatures of evil people who do this stuff. But actually, if we look at the statistics, unfortunately, 1 in 3 women will experience this form of violence or a different form of violence, this being the most common in their lifetime. So this is being done in our communities. to our sisters, to our mothers, to our aunts, to our daughters. And so it's really important that we have an awareness of how we can support it. I view it really as a divine form of, activism, and a form of worship for me is to be able to support other people who are less in positions of power that I am, and privilege to help them. So I'm going to be late and start my 7 minutes now. So thank you for affording me this very quick introduction. I'm going to be talking specifically about spiritual abuse, which is a term that is not very often understood by secular services particularly. We obviously live in a secular environment. The way we give support and offer, interact in the outside world is, for want of a better word, faith blind, although that faith is not just a theology, it's also a cultural practice. So that there are some understandings of the cultural aspects of faith, but really no understanding of what it feels to live like a believer. And that's really important, because that's what we want to share at the Faith and Vogue Coalition, is to educate services that support women, especially experiencing abuse, but women who come from faith communities, because the challenges that they face to accessing support and justice is quite different from those who do not purport to have or live as believers of a faith tradition. And so spiritual abuse is a really important element of that. And because our world is secular, or is purports to be secular, anything to do with religion or faith is like, oh, that's something private I don't know anything about, so don't come talk to me about it. I can help you with like a civil matter. But like faith is the front line of our lives, so you can't not know anything about it. And so part of the experience of domestic abuse, at the heart of it, domestic abuse is about power and control, as Fatima said. And part of that is to use any tool in the perpetrator's kind of toolbox to harm and subjugate and control their victim, often a woman and a survivor, as we call them, not victims. And religion is one of those things that they will use. They will use the law, they will use your immigration status, they will use your housing, they'll use your kids, they'll use your family. They will also use your belief and your faith. And so I will, if you permit me, share very quickly 2 slides about spiritual abuse, to help kind of bring things clearer to you all. So this is just a little bit about the Faith and Vogue Coalition. We are a charity that was independent in 2024. We've been around since 2022. We are secular by structure, but we're faith informed. Everyone that is at the Faith and Vogue Coalition either has a faith or understands why faith is really important. And we work with faith communities because we believe they have been doing this work for many years, way before that there was support services or feminism or any of that stuff. And we also try and support violence against women and girls services and charities and professionals to understand how to be faith sensitive and faith literate. We don't need them to be theology experts, we just need them to know, for example, about things like spiritual abuse. This is spiritual abuse as a definition. We say that spiritual abuse is a tool of power and control that can present as a form of domestic abuse and an exasperating factor in different forms of abuse that Fatima listed, like physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, and economic abuse. This spiritual abuse uses religion, culture, and faith systems to control and subjugate the victim. It is often characterized by a systemic pattern of coercive or controlling behavior, or both, that can take place within a faith or spiritual context. Either faith in the home is used, or faith that is practiced in an institution or in a place of worship or in a congregation, again, is used to control and subjugate. A perpetrator of spiritual abuse could share the same faith as their victim, or they may have a different faith, or they may have no faith at all. So anyone can perpetrate spiritual abuse so long as they know how to use it against their victim or the survivor. And so what would an example of that look like? So I will show you a couple, hopefully. If I click here. So things that could form or constitute spiritual abuse could range any of the following or more. There's unfortunately a lot of forms of spiritual abuse, but these could include forcing the victim to partake in a religious practice against their will, or it could could prevent the victim from taking part in a spiritual practice, or ridiculing their religion or culture or spiritual belief, or forcing them to convert to a new religion or abandon their faith, or hide it, using a twisted, misinterpreted and weaponized form of religious or spiritual teachings. So they'll be cherry picking elements of sacred text or religious tradition or custom in order to gain or maintain control of the victim or coerce them into staying in an abusive relationship. Sorry about all the typos, I did not write this. And using religious or cultural or spiritual ideas or beliefs as the reason to cause harm to a victim. So saying that actually it is because God has said that I am the kind of, the maintainer, the guardian of you. This is why I am preventing you from going out to this place, because God has given me the right to dictate this. So these are just some very quick and sort of top forms of spiritual abuse. I am very happy to just go share with you the impact of spiritual abuse as the last slide. So spiritual abuse can be the most potent and powerful form of abuse for victims who have faith. It can be deeply damaging and have a massive impact on survivors. So abuse can include the following, but isn't limited to it. It's my 7 minutes are up. This is my last slide, so bear with me. The impact of spiritual abuse could be manipulation or exploitation through the influence of religious scripture, teachings, traditions, and other forms of spirituality. It could be enforced accountability, so making a survivor or a victim kind of explain themselves overly, removing liberty and autonomy from them. It could be censoring or denying the liberty or capacity to make independent choices, whether that's from what you wear, who you see, what medicine you take, how you look after your children, when you eat, all of these things, how you pray, when you pray, etc. Requirements for secrecy, isolation, and silence. Rape and sexual assault within the context of intimate or marital relationships is often carried out with the use of religious scripture as a justification, and coercion to conform, control, or enforce observations of certain religious practices or ritual, again through the use of sacred text or religious teachings. In the Muslim tradition, if you are a woman who is pregnant or on her period, you are forbidden from fasting because it's seen as a form of harm to the body. Even if you are a man or a woman or a child who's sick, there are restrictions on fasts, but an example could be that a perpetrator will enforce and force someone to fast despite the fact that, God had said, no, you don't need to, you shouldn't. So that's another form of kind of coercion and enforced observation of religious practice and sharing. So that's another the other final slide, and that is faith and religious tradition are not only experienced as a form of abuse in some cases, but actually that things like your race or your culture, your faith erasure, your sexuality, your age, religious leadership, like in your congregation or community, your gender, and your mental and physical health all have an impact in how faith is used to coerce and control the survivor. So I'll stop there and leave it open for questions and answer. Thank you very much, and thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you, Huda. Thank you. Bear with us because our webinars are only 1 hour. We're trying to take in as much information as we can, but also to induce discussion outside this webinar. So what we're doing is just dropping little nuggets of information. So when Huda and Fatima were talking about the 7 minutes, they had been given strict time so that we could just drop enough nuggets for us to drum up some interest in the topic. So you'll bear with us. But thank you very much, Huda and Fatima. I'm going to introduce Kate, Kate Little. Kate is the Methodist Connectional Safeguarding Survivor Lead Officer. Have I got that right, Kate? Yes, that was quite a mouthful when we shared it, so I needed to make sure I'd got it right. Kate's role is essential in our church as she ensures that the voices of those with lived experience are not just heard, but are central to how we safeguard our communities. Kate will introduce our 3 voices of bravery, survivors who are going to talk to us about their living experience. And I will repeat again that as we prepare to listen to these sacred testimonies, please be mindful of your own spirit. Hearing lived experiences of abuse can be very difficult. And if you find yourself feeling crushed in spirit, please take a breath and remember the 24-hour support line that is on the screen, one of our screens. And also, Huda and Fatima have been kind enough to post their contacts via website on the chat. So please don't suffer in silence. But I will introduce now Kate. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Olive. I'm going to be really quick because I want to hand over to my colleagues, but I wanted to thank you all for being here. I'm Kate Little. I'm the Safeguarding Survivor Lead Officer for the Methodist Church in Britain. And my job has got 2 separate parts. The first part is working to ensure that victims and survivors of any abuse, whether domestic or sexual or bullying, discrimination, harassment, any kind of abuse, making sure that they are supported in their recovery journey and supported if they're going through a process with us. So it could be listening to them, putting them in touch with other survivors for peer support. It could be matching them up with a minister if they want faith-based help, perhaps arranging counselling or signposting them to other specific organisations, generally working to make sure that survivors are empowered to know what their options are. So that's the one half of my job, and the other side is to facilitate survivor engagement and participation groups. That means working with people who are experts by experience, people with a lived experience of any form of abuse, who kindly give up their time to help the Methodist Church to learn from their experience in order that we can improve our response to other victims and survivors of abuse. So this evening, I'm going to introduce you to 3 of my survivor colleagues who take part in this survivor engagement participation work. I wanted to say that I know sharing their stories can be emotionally draining and difficult for them, but hopefully it's therapeutic to know that they are helping others, preventing others from going through what they've gone through. So I wanted to start by introducing Sarah Simpkin. Sarah works for the Cheshire Parent Carer Forum, and she's very active at her local Methodist church. She runs a dinner hub which feeds nearly 100 families every week from her Methodist church, but she's also a member of the Methodist Church's Methodist Survivors Advisory Group and also a member of our Safeguarding Committee. Sarah is really passionate about making our church a safer and more welcoming place. She's now in a happy relationship with 3 children, but she was formerly in a physically abusive and coercively controlling relationship. And she's going to now, with bravery, tell us about her experience of domestic abuse and how she survived it. So, Sarah, if I can hand over to you, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So it was just over 20 years ago that I was involved in a very violent and controlling relationship. Although the relationship only lasted for around a year, the control he had on my life and also sometimes physical attacks continued for a further 10 years. We met online and I was quite young. I was looking for love and I believed that I'd found it. We did communicate for quite a long time, visited back to each other as he lived quite a distance away from me. But as long distance relationships are quite hard, it wasn't long before we decided to make the move to move in together. And as we didn't have the financial means to do that on our own, he came and lived with me in my parents' home. This was a mistake that I didn't realise I was making at the time, but it meant that it cut off a means of escape because I couldn't return home to safety as he was now there. Things were really good at the beginning. He was very loving. He was very attentive. I started to notice little things that where he didn't like me talking to somebody, or he might complain about something that I'd eaten and said, that wasn't very good for me, or he didn't like my favourite programme that I watched on TV, and so, won't watch that anymore. Things like that. The first time he hit me came a little bit out of the blue. And we were in an argument, and I accepted that I'd annoyed him, and he was devastated and cried. And so I comforted him because he was so upset and took it that would never happen again. And the next time he was again devastated, and that was because that day he'd had a really bad day at work. And so I could understand how awful it had been for him that day. And so we could forget about that one. And it slowly got worse and worse. And before I knew it, I was in a relationship where I was being beaten almost every day. And almost every decision that you could make for yourself was being made by him. He isolated me from friends. He caused difficulty for me at work, which meant I was disciplined at work, and eventually lost my job. I was prevented from talking to all of my friends, and eventually it was just me and him at home with my parents. My parents were aware, and I think although sometimes they tried to stand up for me, they didn't quite know how to manage this situation either. They saw that he was a very troubled man and were kind-hearted and always wanted to offer support for him, not realising, I think, how bad it actually became for me. My self-esteem dropped, my appearance dropped, and I became to believe more that what I was getting I deserved. As well as the injuries involving black eyes, sprains, and occasional breaks, concussions, I was also raped on a regular basis, and I had intimate injuries. One of the worst parts of the relationship was the embarrassment that he would cause. So out in public, he would humiliate me. He would degrade me. He would degrade me around his friends. And right at the end of the relationship, he would force me to be with his friends. As I say, I was only with him for a year, and I was lucky to escape with my life. And I slowly started to rebuild my life, but he was always there in the background. I was not safe to be out on my own any time. There were times that he would come to my house. There'd be times when we'd run into each other in the city. And many years later, there was a very serious attack. And eventually, after that attack, he was arrested and he was deemed not fit to go straight to jail. He was remanded in secure custody in a mental institution where he remained for several years. So then began my recovery, really. Trying to learn how to be me, trying to learn how to make decisions for myself, having the strength to walk through the door again without feeling petrified. I didn't know how big an impact it had on my faith while it was happening or immediately afterwards. But as I started to find myself, I realised that I didn't pray anymore. And I hadn't prayed for many years, where I used to be somebody that prayed every day. And I realised that that was because I held a lot of shame and guilt over what had happened to me. And I didn't feel that I deserved that connection anymore. So that's why I stopped speaking to Jesus. So a few years ago, I was put in touch with a minister and I told him my story. And we started to sit together and explore the Bible together and explore, specifically looking at parts of the Bible where Jesus interacted with women, and especially women that society put shame on. Not necessarily that women had done wrong. In most cases, they hadn't done anything wrong, but the society held shame for them, and how Jesus talked to them, and how Jesus loved them. And I've used that as a part way of helping me heal in my journey, to find that self-forgiveness, to find a way of lifting some of that shame. And I am not by any means recovered, but I am stronger now, and I am stronger every day. And although I still struggle with prayer, I have found a way of being able to sit with Jesus again and feel him with me and feel his love. So that is my story of an extreme domestic violence situation. A long time in pain and suffering afterwards, but followed by a recovery. And as Kate said, I am very happy to say that I have a very loving man who understands me very well, and 3 amazing children that I never thought I would have. Thank you for giving me your time.
Oh, Sarah, it's so emotional hearing you speak. Thank you so much for speaking today. I know it's not easy for you, and I'm very grateful to you for speaking. There'll be the chance to ask any of the speakers questions at the end. But if it's okay, because time is short, I need to move on to the next speaker. Sorry to rush you, Sarah, and I'm very grateful. Our next speaker today is Tekla Helpline. Tekla is the mother of 3 children. She was formerly married to a violent and abusive husband, but she's now free of that relationship, and she's passionate about speaking out about domestic abuse and trying to help other women to escape situations like the one that she suffered for so many years. And she's now going to bravely talk about her experience of domestic abuse and how she survived it. So I'll hand over to Tekla. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Tekla. I'm one of the survivors of domestic abuse. I got married at a very tender age. From my culture, it's if you're a girl child and you turn on late, your parents will ask you to leave. That's what happened to me, unfortunately, when I was very young. I ended up getting married before time, and I got married to a person whom I've never really knew, and I stayed with him. It didn't take me 2 weeks to have the first scar, Within 2 weeks, he had got into his drinking habits, come back home, complained about little things. Little did I know that the first incident after 2 weeks was going to last me more than 3 decades. The extreme moment whereby he hit me and I had an ear injury. It was just 6 months after we got married, and my relatives came to take me home. That's when I realized that I was pregnant with my first daughter, who's now 29. I stayed in that relationship with on and offs, physically being abused, embarrassing, like the previous I think the previous speaker was just saying something that was just familiar with my ex-husband. He used to embarrass me in front of people. There is no place that I can say I didn't get this form of abuse. In church, shopping areas, in the hospital, everywhere. And my ex-husband was using power because he was one of the security agents in the country. So it didn't help me. It didn't help me much. Trying to report him was just like I'm reporting in the same house, because they wouldn't take him in. They would just release him. I tried several times to report this issue, but I didn't get support. I tried to. I noticed that if you tell elders in the church about domestic abuse, it's a form of finding counseling, because what they would do is they would sit down with you and start to counsel both parties, and because they wouldn't encourage divorce, and because there were 3 children now in my marriage, they wouldn't encourage me to leave him. So it was in 2015, whereby in our country where I come from, domestic violence bill came out, and women had protested that these people who are being violent to us, they should be arrested just like any other person. When that came out, I read it all. It was a thick volume with many pages. I read that all, and I understood the law. And I told myself, because I was tired of telling family members and being turned back, no one could support me really, because they would take me back as per our culture. They thought it was a taboo to leave a man over abuse, or they would think things were going to change. At one time, I even thought that I was wrong also, and I would accept some of the things that I hadn't done, so that we could move on with our lives. In 2015, he did it again, severely, physically abusing me, and ended up with bleeding eyes, and it was quite terrible. So when I went in to report him, I declared that he should be taken in because of this case, because it was one of the cases that they had taken further after the law had been passed. He was released on bail, and I went home. I used to go to my place. Unfortunately, my parents died during the early years that I just got married. My father died a year after, and my mom died 4 years after I got married. So being the eldest daughter in the family of 3 and looking after my siblings, it was quite difficult for me to come back home and live with my siblings, where poverty and everything else was there, and they were looking after me. I looked like somebody who was a little bit better than anyone. So it would force me to go back again. But in my marriage life, I think I have gone back home more than 50 times, telling myself that I cannot live this life anymore. So it was then I got the opportunity to come here in England. And before I came here in England, he knew that somehow I may leave him, and he asked me to marry him formally, having a wedding. And on that wedding day, I had a black eye. On that wedding, it was a wedding where there were only few people. I had a black eye, and instead of celebrating the birthday, I was even scared and sending people locations because I didn't know where he was taking me to. So when I relocated in this country, they were supposed to be joining me as family, both him and the children. But then during that time he was finishing his program at a university. I noted that he was because I was sending all the money home from here. He would access my Gmail account, so he knew how much I got paid, and he would do the budget whilst he was in Africa, and I would send the money, and I wouldn't even fail to send the money by the first of every month, and he would use the money to build the house. And it wasn't clear how he was using the money. Was one of the people, one of the Methodist members said, your son is going to school in tattered clothes, yet I was sending money. That's when we started having a dispute, and that's when we started having a serious fight over the phone. And then I decided, I said, I'm done. I've been through a lot with you. I've been through abuse and I've been through everything. And I surrendered and I left, and I told him that we should only go through divorce. It was also difficult for me to then ask my son, who was 14, to join me over, as um, he he didn't sign anything for the son to get his visa. So his first visa was declined, and I had to go through the lawyers to get my son, who's here with me now. The other two children were left in Africa because of their age. They are adults. I would like to say about domestic abuse. It's actually difficult when somebody is using physical harm, coercive, financial. I think I faced all most type of abuse in my life, and I would like to thank God that Faith and other women who helped me to believe in God and to keep holding on. I'm actually well now, at a safer place here in England, and I managed to find support. I couldn't even speak about it for any other reason, and I couldn't even tell it to anyone because I was so scared of him. A woman who has been going through abuse would be somebody who's very vulnerable and scared. Sometimes here, when we were here in England, we would actually feel, me and my son, we could actually feel as if he is watching us or he is following us. But I would like to thank the support that I got from my safeguarding officer, from Kate, from my reverend, from the church, the Methodist church. And my wish is to support other women who are also going through it, to tell them that they can do it and they can be in a safer place. I would like to thank you. This is all I can say now.
Tekla, thank you so much for speaking about your experience. Tekla also spoke at a previous Methodist Women in Britain event at the Butterfly Church service back in November, which I think is up on the Methodist Women in Britain website. Thank you very much, Tekla. I'm really grateful to you for speaking. And again, there'll be a chance to ask questions at the end if anyone wanted to ask anything of the speakers about their experience. I want to move on to speak to hear from the final speaker now. Pauline Salter is a Methodist presbyter, a Methodist minister. She's now sat down to become supernumerary to retire. She's active in her local district still. She offers supervision to other ministers still in active service, and she's also a member of the survivors group. She's really wants to make the church a safer place. Her experience was that she was married to a former Methodist superintendent minister who was very abusive towards her and towards their children, and she's now going to share some of her experience with us and how she escaped from the difficult situation. Thank you, Pauline.
Hello. I'm not sure if it's changed to me being on full screen or not. My name's Pauline, and as Kate has said, I was married to a Methodist minister. He was extremely violent and controlling, and I experienced sexual assaults. He is currently partway through a prison sentence, out on licence, for rape and sexual abuse of other people. He served 11 years plus 9 years plus 9 years for rape and attempted rape of me. So yes, the assaults were really serious. I think the hardest thing, though, to recover from and to escape from was the coercive control, because I was eventually made so I didn't really know who I was. I wasn't allowed to speak to people. He controlled how I wore my hair. He controlled what clothes I wore. And that was partly done by buying things for me or paying for me to go and get my hair done. It was all about, I had to look how he wanted me to look. If you look, I've got my hair behind my ears as I'm speaking to you. If I had done that in public, he would have just said to me, ears, so that I would remove my hair from behind my ears. It's a petty thing. It's a tiny thing, but it's just a sign of the absolute control that he wanted. One of the things that we said people might want to know about is how we survived. Well, the reality is I have survived because I got out. I got out because the past cases review looked at his case. I'd already escaped the marriage, but I lived in fear for years after I'd escaped. The past cases review showed that he was an extremely dangerous person. If I had stayed in that relationship, I would be dead. There's no two ways about it. He was the kind of messed up human being who would have killed me. And the person who reviewed all the papers about his psychiatric state and the way he behaved said I was lucky to be alive, because the end, if I hadn't got out, I would have been dead. Partly I share my story because as a Methodist minister, an intelligent, strong-minded woman of faith, I don't fit the profile of what most people think is a victim of domestic violence. And my abuser was not somebody high-powered, although he was a superintendent, but he was a religious figure. He was a leader in the church, but so was I. And yet he chose to use the power to bully me, my children, to assault me, to rape me, and to control every aspect of my life. When it comes to support, I have to say, and Kate will nod, because the reality is I was almost thrown to the wolves by the Methodist Church. I was helped to find an appointment and to go full-time instead of being part-time unpaid as a Methodist minister. But the reality was I was silenced because of the confidentiality of the way Methodism deals with its discipline of ministers. So I moved with 2 children in my 40s, a teenager and a younger child, into churches who never knew my backstory and didn't understand why their minister was a single parent. I got abuse from other ministers who didn't believe in divorce. I had difficulties with colleagues who didn't believe that abuse of any kind existed within the church. And I couldn't tell my story because it wasn't out there. After the past cases review, when I eventually spoke to the police and we got him to court, from then I could tell my story, because I realised the first night he was in prison that as I walked out to take my dustbin to the front where the rubbish would be collected, I walked back and I realised I wasn't looking in the little cul-de-sac where I lived to see if there was anybody there watching, waiting to attack me. The first night he'd left, if you wind back 17, 18 years before that, and I locked my front door, I locked it, and my first thought was, tonight I can go to sleep and be certain I will wake up alive. So I had lived for many years thinking I wouldn't wake up alive. And then in the years after we separated, there was always that fear that he might be lurking somewhere or get someone to attack me. I'm happy, I'm single. I did marry a second time. He wasn't very good either. I've kept 3 wonderful stepdaughters, and I'm friends with their mum actually from the second marriage. But I'm enjoying being sat down, being involved in the church. I'm very active in my grandchildren's lives. And so actually, I'm actually really quite happy. And I was given a thing this week that said, spend 10 minutes with God to talk about what you are anxious or worried about. And I sat there and I thought, there isn't anything. There is nothing in my life where I'm sitting there feeling anxious or worried. How amazing is that, to go from a place of fear? And I think that's because my faith has kept me strong. I have never felt at any point that God abandoned me. I have always felt the presence of God. Even in the moments when I'd just been attacked, I was aware of a very strong presence of God. And that has never left me. I survived an abusive marriage with my children, with my faith and with my ministry intact. And that was enough. So thank you.
Pauline, I'm really grateful to you, because I know it's hard as a minister. I have to say that quite a few ministers have contacted me and said that they are a survivor of abuse, but they do not want anyone to know. And they've said, I want to talk to you in private, but I can't speak out. So I'm grateful to you for doing it. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, everyone. We'll hand back to Olive. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kate. And thank you to Pauline, to Sarah, and to Tekla. It's not easy to listen to other people's stories, and it can't be any easier to talk about them and relive your situations, even though we've only given you 5 minutes. We are concerned about your well-being now. So if you do feel like speaking to anybody, please do. Our numbers are there. Kate is there. And the undertaking that we can give you is the women that are on the screen now, and many other women are here because we are joining hands so we can fight situations like this, so nobody else has to ever feel the way you feel and live the way you've lived. I hope you can continue to heal with our partners, with those working against abuse. We will get to a point where all perpetrators will be behind, and we can encourage people to seek treatment, so we can completely eliminate this. But thank you very much. As I said earlier, if anybody has been triggered by this, please contact somebody. Our host tonight has graciously given us a little bit more time because of the content of this particular topic. We will still allow a questions and answer session if you have any. So if you do have any questions, have anything that you would like to point out, please go ahead. We are going to open the floor now to those who would like to speak. Just a reminder that our webinars are put up on our website and on our YouTube site. So if there is anyone who is asking a question or has a comment that they do not want to be published, please let us know before you start speaking, and we will edit your comment out. So this is for your safety, your wellness, and that's priority. The floor is open. I think while we're waiting for other people to come through, if I could just start, I noticed there was a question in the chat that came through from Tekla. And I think Tekla was asking, and I thought I'd repeat it because it might benefit other people, whether the service provided by Forward UK or Faith and Vogue Coalition is a walk-in service or referral. Fatima, I'll ask you to just respond to that. I see you've responded on the chat, but it would be good for people to understand and hear.
Yes, sure. I'm happy to answer. I noted in the chat that at Forward UK we don't have walk-in services, and our primary kind of forms of ways in which individuals access support is through self-referral or agency referral. But you can find more information on our website, which includes kind of in more detail, kind of the support provided within the organization, And it also includes a referral for example, if you want to self-refer, it asks just some questions in order for us to be able to then contact you. But the support that we offer within Forward includes kind of one-to-one counselling, group support, but also other things as well, such as advocacy and training, and further support in terms of referral that individuals need. So we do our best to try and provide that holistic support as an organization. But I'm available if anyone has any more kind of questions as to what we do as an organization.
Please feel free to ask any other questions. Please go ahead, Karen.
This is a question for Pauline. Just to say thank you to Pauline and Tekla and Sarah for sharing their stories. But I co-chair the Domestic Abuse Methodist Church Steering Group, and we do sometimes get contact from ministers who are in abusive relationships. And I wondered what advice Pauline may give to another minister who is going through the same as she went through all those years ago.
I think it's really hard to give advice because everybody's situation is different. The first thing I would say is contact somebody. So if they've contacted you, that is a step forward, or contact Kate. I have spoken one-to-one with some Methodist ministers as part of peer support that the survivors group offers. And I'm happy to speak to people to talk them through their journey. The trouble is, it's very difficult to give advice because when the roof over your head and your income and everything depends on you coming clean about being in an abusive relationship, whether you're the minister or the spouse or the child in the relationship, is very, very difficult because you could lose everything. I think particularly spouses feel very trapped, but also I think ministers are afraid to report because they're frightened of what people further up the food chain, as it were, will say. Will they get a new appointment if they stand up and say that they're abused? Is it a sign of weakness? But my advice is put your head above the parapet and speak. Perhaps start with Kate and people like myself who've been in that situation. It's a really scary position because I didn't dare report my husband because I had no income, I had 2 children, and I'd have had no roof over my head with a very angry man. But seek help and perhaps start by talking to trusted friends, other ministers. But certainly, if you go through Kate, you can be referred to one of us who are prepared to help.
Thank you, Pauline. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Pauline. Thank you. We've got another hand up. Maggie, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I very much appreciated all the speakers tonight for their bravery and their commitment. I was married to a United Reformed Church minister, and I know from talking to clergy wives, an awful lot of what Pauline said has been my experience, people sharing issues of domestic abuse, and a lot of it seemed to be more chipping away at people's confidence, and how difficult it is if you are in that situation, that you can't, if your friends are also in the church, who do you talk to? Because you can't talk to your friends because of the church connection, and also that the church generally seems to expect clergy and clergy wives to not be at risk of these sorts of things. That if they're if they're married, and everything in the garden should be lovely if you're Christians in Christian service. So thank you very much for that, Pauline. That really struck a chord with me. I was lucky. I was not ever been a subject of domestic violence, but I was very much aware of it, and its impact that it had on whole families, particularly children. I used to run Sunday school, and sometimes you would hear concerns coming from the children, not necessarily directly, but while they were chatting about, hearing mummy and daddy shouting at night and the impact it had on them. So it is really quite an insidious thing. It seems to really sort of dig deep into family life and fellowship.
Thank you, Maggie. I think from the point of view of an organization, possibly such as Methodist Women in Britain, and I think there might be people here who represent various organizations that may not have the understanding of the steps to take. What can we do? And I think this is an open question, possibly to you, Kate, to you, Karen, and also to Huda, to Fatima. How can we be of assistance? I've just seen Tekla's hand was up. I will come back to you, Tekla. But I think just what can we do as organizations or individuals? Yeah.
Yes, I really appreciate that question. Happy to just contribute first. This is precisely why the Faith and Violence Against Women and Girls Coalition was set up, because we understand that this goes on in all communities, in every walk of life. And the first people to know about it are friends and family. And if you're in a faith community, it's often your congregation, your church leader. If you are not someone who's experiencing abuse from the leadership in a religious space. But there is all the support does not see faith as a place that is that this could happen, and so everyone assumes that in a faith context these things don't happen because everyone is nice and kind and has good morals. But that's nothing to do with how abuse works. It's about power and control, and it doesn't necessarily look, a perpetrator is not someone with horns and a tail. They are upstanding members of the community, as in Pauline's case, or people in the security services, as in Tekla's case, or people are, who are, seem that are troubled and need help and are vulnerable themselves. So it's understanding that this mythology around perpetrators of abuse being, identifiable men who are not nice, you can tell them a mile off, is not true. And so what do we do when we need help? Because part of the abuse is that you are silenced and you are shamed for having allowed this to happen to you. No one wants this to happen to them, but they are shamed into saying, well, why don't you just walk out? Which is often the question that people ask. And as very clearly explained to all of us by the amazing speakers, is that it's not that simple. But also, why don't we say, why doesn't he stop? Why doesn't he walk out? Why should I walk out from my home and what I have to experience? And I'm the one who has been done an injustice, and so very often our families and friends will say things like that are really unhelpful. And in some cases, that listening to that makes the survivor think, actually, maybe it is me. Maybe I need to be quiet. Maybe it is my cross to bear. Maybe it is a test from God. Maybe all I need to do is pray harder. And so that's why we, as a coalition, do a lot of training and support to faith institutions. And we also ask people to become members of our coalition. So anybody who works in this space, you don't need to be a person of faith. or you can be especially welcome if you are a person of faith who is either in the church leadership or in religious spaces, in safeguarding spaces like Kate, or a survivor that wants to do more. You can join us and be connected to other faith groups, institutions, churches, and individuals and survivors who do this work. So if anybody is interested in receiving free training around what to do, what the law says, where you can get help, or how to be faith sensitive, then please contact us. We'd be happy to help you. But the first thing, as Pauline said, is to ask for support. Every local authority has a support service. If you go into Google and say domestic abuse help in Redbridge, in Birmingham, then you will get a list of numbers. The minimum you can do is make that number available to somebody who you think is in need. That's my interjection.
Thank you very much, Huda. Thank you. I will take the last question. Sorry, Fatima, you wanted to say something?
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'm aware of time.
All right, thank you.
That covered it all.
Yes, I think there was a question coming in from Tekla. Are you there?
Yes, I would like to make a contribution. I think I heard the previous speaker saying about children. When you're going through this journey of healing after abuse, it's quite a difficult journey that needs more support. You are taking steps and you're so scared. You're even scared to start another relationship, and the children suffers most because if you are to go through counseling, it has to be like for me and my son, we went through trauma counseling, and they really need support, and they really need even the schools to intervene, even the church to observe that these things is finally left. Because you can imagine a 14-year-old, all he knew was violence from the day he was born. Bringing up a child like that into the society and mixing up with others is bringing up a broken child. So I wanted to ask whether it's possible, because most of the people who goes to church, is there a way whereby people can actually speak about violence in church? Is there a way? Because it's not easy for somebody, a woman who's coming into church with their children, to contact somebody like Kate Little to let them know that they are going through physical abuse. And all these people are members of the church. How best can we do to support families who are actually going through it?
Thank you for that question, Tekla. And I think it is in webinars like these that we start the conversations. And if you remember right at the beginning when we started, we said we are dropping nuggets of information so that we can induce each and every one of us to go and begin to talk about the issues that we don't talk about in mainstream church. It is challenging that the church is only a building, or the faith center is only a building for worship. It should be a place that is safe enough for us to discuss these issues that are not spoken about on a day-to-day basis. And I think that encouragement, unfortunately, we could go on forever. And I know there's a lot that we can talk about on this topic and many other topics, but unfortunately, we've gone over our time. We're grateful to our host, but I will encourage that, as Karen mentioned, that she's co-chair of the Domestic Abuse Committee. Is that correct, Karen?
It's the Methodist Church Domestic Abuse Steering Group.
Yes. And I think it's steering groups like that, and it's coming together to see how we can synergize, how we can get training from the likes of Forward UK, from the likes of Faith and Vogue Coalition for ourselves, so that we are equipped. But I think this is where I'd like to encourage everybody here to take what we've learned, what we've heard from here, to challenge themselves, to challenge each other on what can we do within our communities, what can we do within our areas, how can we make a change. I know I hadn't mentioned this, and Carolyn might bite my head, but I just took this opportunity to say, you will meet, if you are coming to our Swanwick conference, you are going to meet Carolyn, who's going to be our speaker. Carolyn Godfrey is a past vice president of the Methodist Conference, but she will be speaking on a topic called Where Power Meets Purpose, Small Acts That Change the World. And it's these small acts that we're talking about that will start now in what we do, the little that we do. So besides advertising Swanwick, I think it's also that topic that is important in that the little that we do. It doesn't matter what it is. That small thing will change the world. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I will reiterate that if you have been triggered, please speak to someone. Please reach out. If you know somebody who is feeling a bit intimidated or you've seen something, I think speak to authorities. It's important for safety rather than regret later on. We will see you again in March for our Let's Talk About It series. In March, we will be talking about social justice, poverty, and money. We will be back again in May with immigration and welcoming the stranger, and in June with gender and sexuality. But as you leave this digital space, please hold yourself with gentleness. If anything tonight has touched a place of pain, please reach out to the professional services of the safeguarding contacts appearing on your screen or the numbers. There is no shame in seeking help. Thank you, everybody. Go in peace, go in grace, and let us continue to be a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. Thank you all. Good night.